Welcome back at WNST, Tass in Baltimore, and WNST.net. Yes, I am aglow in the wash of purple lighting here, and the purple rope lights out, and a big football game. We've got bye week, and here come the Tennessee Titans. And I thought, man, who knows more about the Tennessee Titans than this guy? Ran them for a little while, and of course, ran the Minnesota Vikings for a little while back in the era of my partner, Brian Billick. We've put the Brian Billick Lombardi Trophy image up here in the studio as well. Jeff Diamond, former NFL Executive of the Year. He's out on Twitter. He still loves the NFL, and you can find him at Jeff Diamond NFL up in Minnesota, where, I don't know if they got Super Bowl fever in Minnesota, but they got a, hey, we're still alive fever, right? I mean, that was a very, very impressive victory for all four teams over the weekend. But and we got Tennessee on our minds, but Minnesota's a wash right now, right?
Yeah, definitely, Nestor. It was a huge win for the Vikings, no doubt, and very a thrilling win in overtime in New Orleans. And the Vikings were big underdogs going in there, 8-point underdogs. And Mike Zimmer, the coach, was playing the no respect card all week and saying, "Hey, we're big underdogs." And the NFL put out this video talking about all the other playoff teams, including, of course, the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And they didn't mention the Vikings. And he told his team that. He told the media that. And so he kind of played that card. But as we know, going into a playoff game, as Kirk Cousins says, it really a playoff game should be enough motivation. And the Vikings went out and played very well. I think they did some great things defensively in that game, and give Mike Zimmer some credit for moving to Neil Hunter and Everson Griffin, his star defensive ends, inside, where they had a better matchup against the Saints guards, and they really, I think, disrupted Drew Brees and the Saints passing offense and did a great job. Had 3 sacks and a big interception by Anthony Harris. But I think the takeaway from the game, especially here locally in the Twin Cities, is Kirk Cousins and how he came through in the clutch, which has been kind of the knock on him historically. As you know, of course, in that Baltimore-Washington area, and everybody talks about his Monday night record and his primetime record. Well, it doesn't get any bigger than a playoff game, and he really delivered in the clutch with 3 great throws on the overtime winning drive, and especially the long 43-yard bomb to Adam Thielen. And I think this Vikings team is kind of under the radar, a lot of confidence now. They've got a lot of talent, and we know that. And I like their chances going into San Francisco. They beat the 49ers last year in the opening game. They intercepted Garoppolo 3 times in that game. And I think they have a really good chance to pull another upset this week in the Bay Area. And it kind of reminds me of 1987. And I was talking with old friends of the Vikings, such as Bob Hagan over there last week. And I said, hey, remember 87 when the Vikings went into the playoffs? And I was an assistant GM in Minnesota at the time. And we knocked off New Orleans as we were the last wild card team, went on the road, beat New Orleans in the Superdome, and then went to San Francisco, number 1 seed, Joe Montana, Bill Walsh, Ronnie Lott, Jerry Rice, and upset the 49ers and really dominated them that day. Anthony Carter had 200 yards receiving. Chris Dolan, Hall of Fame defensive end, had a couple sacks, and Wade Wilson won the game as the quarterback and had that great playoff run. Unfortunately, it ended up in Washington, and we lost the NFC Championship game just barely. But still, it was a very special playoff run in my career in that 87 season.
Jeff Diamond joining us here. You can follow him at Jeff Diamond NFL out on Twitter. I want to get off the Ravens and the Titans. We'll get to that in a minute, Lamar and all the magic. And I can hear the smile in your voice when you talk about Lamar Jackson. This is a weird time in the league, right? I mean, Zimmer, who I love, by the way, but the notion that he might go coach the Cowboys and that Marvin Lewis is in Dallas one day and Washington another day, and they hire McCarthy, and my pal Mike Nolan's now going to go to Dallas. And there's a lot of upheaval. I mean, even Greg Roman was interviewing last week for the Browns job. I remember, when Brian lost the game with you in '98, that Carmen Policy was there ready to whisk him off to Cleveland. San Diego wanted him, and we got him here in Baltimore. The 2 weeks at the end of the season, it's disruptive for a lot of the playoff coordinators and for a lot of the franchises, right? Because everybody wants to get, Josh McDaniels was another guy last week before the New England game. At the time that it's most important, it can be very disruptive.
Yeah, it definitely can, and I think it's very unfortunate because obviously I believe that the coach's focus should be on that team and that game coming up, and we dealt with that with Brian in '98 in Minnesota when I was the GM there, and he was being courted by the Ravens especially, and also, as you said, by the Browns. But I think it's disruptive to a team to have to deal with that type of situation when you got a big game coming up. And in '98 for us, it was right before the NFC Championship against Atlanta that we unfortunately lost in overtime. And Brian's a longtime friend of mine, and I was so happy for him to get the opportunity in Baltimore until, of course, I went to Tennessee, and then we lost to the Ravens in the 2000 season in the divisional playoff round in an upset at home in Nashville. But Brian's been a longtime friend, and so. But I think you're right. I think it is disruptive to teams. I think that it's hard because it's a catch-22. You don't want to deny coaches their opportunity to become a head coach, which is a dream for them. And if they don't have access to being interviewed, then what are you going to do? So I think the league has tried to make it as painless as possible with having interviews early in the week and in off weeks or whatever. And I think the Vikings are dealing with that with Kevin Stefanski too right now, their offensive coordinator. And there's rumors that the Browns are interested in him and so forth. So I think it's very difficult and it is disruptive to teams, and it's just one of those unfortunate situations hard to avoid.
Jeff, I know you probably still have a soft spot for your Titans and, the Eddie George, Ray Lewis videos this week. I've had all the Tennessee media, Jim Wyatt's been on, Teresa, they've all talked about winning the game in 2003, losing the game in 2009, the Matt Stover kick. There's quite a history between these two, and at one point really truly was a rivalry at the turn of the century in the same division. Boy, Derrick Henry's running the ball well. They've caught this lightning in a bottle with Tannehill. You talk about the pedigree of Mike Vrabel and what he's brought there. That was an impressive victory, and I think there's something about riding out and seeing the taillights behind you of the lighthouse in Foxborough and knowing that you've ended Belichick and Brady's season, but you got to come back and play Lamar Jackson and play the number one seed in the sport this week. We're a little nervous in Baltimore. We've sat with our feet up on the couch, and what that bye week can and can't do, and the rust versus rest and all of that. But it feels like there's nothing to stop Lamar right now. And I think veteran guys like you watch this thing and say, that's just something I've never seen before. And most of us feel like we've seen everything.
Yeah, I think he is definitely such a special talent and so hard to account for, and will be a huge challenge to the Vikings front seven to be able to contain him in the ball game, and I think that's what really will be the difference. As long as the moment's not too big for him, and of course he has not won his first playoff game yet, and so I think that there is pressure there, and there's big pressure as the number one seed, as opposed to Tennessee coming there kind of loose and figuring we're playing on house money a little bit, kind of as the Vikings are going to feel going to San Francisco as a number one seed compared to a number 6 seed. And so I think that kind of sets up for the Titans to be able to go in there and, as I said, play loose and take their best shot at the Ravens. But I do think the Ravens will prevail in this game. I just think they're too strong defensively. They are the number 5 rushing defense, and I think they can load up and try to shut down Derrick Henry, or at least limit him, control him, and then try to force Tannehill to beat them, which Tannehill's been on a roll. We know that. But again, I think the Ravens have an underrated defense. They have a exceptional offense led by their quarterback, and I think they've just got too many weapons for the Titans to slow them down enough in this game. But I think it could be closer than what the spread is, shall we say.
Jeff, you've presided over drafts in a couple of different organizations at a different era, of the game, when Michael Vick's coming out, Randall Cunningham, you go back that far as well, and anyone else who's ever come out that was going to be a running quarterback or someone that was going to approach linebackers 12, 15 times a game trying to get yards in the middle of an NFL field. Most of the time that was frowned upon, and, Bill Polian's taken on a lot of heat about the wide receiver Lamar Jackson thing. But it does take a certain amount of courage, and it takes a certain organization. I mean, every organization, including the Ravens, overlooked Lamar Jackson, the first pick that they had, but went back and found value at the end of the first round. But it's only in an organization where there's an Ozzie Newsome and an Eric DeCosta and a Joe Ortiz and a George Kukanis, these guys that have been here for 20 years, that can go into Steve Bisciotti and say, we're going to do this differently. And they can sell this to John Harbaugh, and John Harbaugh can help sell it. But having an organizational buy-in on what John has called a revolution, including Greg Roman buying in on this and Marshall Yonda and veteran players that say we're going to do something that's never been done before and we're going to win a Super Bowl doing it. That's a tough sell in your space of an executive going to an owner and saying, we're going to turn our whole franchise in a way that's never been done before.
Yeah, and I give tremendous credit to, starting with Ozzie Newsome, kind of his parting gift to the franchise, more or less, and Eric DeCosta for, along with Ozzie, identifying the special talent that Lamar Jackson could be. And they had Flacco at the time, and they didn't have to make that move, but obviously, in historically retrospect, it was a fantastic move. And then I give credit to John Harbaugh and Greg Roman, but especially John Harbaugh for his willingness to embrace a different system, a different approach with a running quarterback, take the risk when you got these tremendous defenders out there in the league that can take a guy out in a second and be able to run the risk that he could get hurt, but they're still going to run the read option. They're going to run all the stuff that they can do with him, roll him out, and get him on the perimeter. And I think what you find with guys like special players, special running abilities, such as Lamar Jackson, such as Russell Wilson, is they end up not getting hurt because they don't take big hits as much. Now, we've seen Lamar take a couple of big hits, but Russell, you rarely see him take a big hit. He knows when to go down, and I think Lamar is going to learn that more and more as time goes on, and I hope he does, because I think he is such a great talent and great for the league and the sport. And I just, as I said, I salute John Harbaugh especially for being willing to create a system and an environment there that allowed him to flourish.
Jeff Diamond, our guest. You can follow him out at Jeff Diamond NFL. Vikings and Titans, and still alive. Both of your core franchises. There's a nice little January gift for you. Who's going to beat Lamar Jackson? And Jeff, I'm doing the kiss of death. I'm flying down to Miami later on this week to scout my events, and we throw big parties in hotels, and we're doing all that stuff. I've got a waiting list. People are on the interest list. We've never had an AFC Championship game here as the Ravens. The last time was 1971. I got my dad's ticket stub out from that Raiders game from many, many, many moons ago. Your thoughts about beating Lamar Jackson and who that team is going to be? So at some point you start to win 12 in a row, you feel like you're on borrowed time to some degree. Do you only need to win 3 more?
Yeah, you do, and it's tough. And I saw that in 1998 in Minnesota. We were 15-1, had the best record in the league. We were on cruise control and winning the NFC Championship against the Falcons, and who incidentally were 14-2 that year, and people kind of underrated them. And we were big favorites and had a 13-point lead in that game. And all of a sudden, our kicker, Gary Anderson, misses his first field goal of the year, and the floodgates open. The Falcons beat us in overtime, and we wonder how the heck did that happen when we have Randall Cunningham's the MVP, Randy Moss and Chris Carter, and all that on that football team. I think the team that can potentially beat the Ravens is the Kansas City Chiefs, and because of Patrick Mahomes and the weapons that he has, and the fact that the Chiefs' defense has really been coming on the last half of the season, and they've gotten healthier. And so, to me, that will be a fascinating AFC Championship if both teams emerge this week, which I expect them to do. I would be really excited to watch that football game, and honestly, I think it would be hard for me not to pick the Chiefs in that game, even though I have a lot of friends in Baltimore. But to me, that could be the team that takes them down. And if it happens, I would not be overly surprised, because Patrick Mahomes is also a special talent too, and he has been there last year, AFC Championship overtime, almost beat the Patriots. And I think they're kind of on a mission too. But that would be a fantastic matchup. I hope they get to that point.
Well, the Ravens have lost to them twice, so it would certainly make for some conversation next week. Last thing for you, because you mentioned defense and you mentioned that coming on and getting better. Boy, the Ravens defense, we went to Cleveland a couple weeks ago, completely different game and team, really, 12 weeks later. And you talk about Eric DeCosta and Ozzie's gift. This year, DeCosta up for Executive of the Year, and I started touting this in November when I saw the impact that Josh Bynes, Domata Peko, the trade for Marcus Peters, and bringing in Jihad Ward, bringing in these guys that have been impact players in mid-flow and mid-season. I mean, it really speaks to the pro personnel, the scouting, finding the right guys, identifying them. D'Amato Pekka wanted to come here, was beating his agent up about getting here 2 weeks before he even got here because he wants to win a championship. This is really special, I think, what they've done personnel-wise here since September to fortify the defense, to make it the kind of defense that's going to match up better with Mahomes than maybe they did the first time around.
Yeah, and perhaps that's the case, and they have done a fantastic job rebuilding that defense. Everybody thought it was going to go down the tubes in free agency when they lost several star players, and guys like Suggs were out of there. And then they made the kind of the controversial signing of Earl Thomas, and who obviously he's not the player that he was in Seattle, but he's still a pretty good player, and he can still make plays and bring some leadership and a Super Bowl pedigree to that locker room, which is important this time of year. So. I give them a lot of credit for what they did defensively. I didn't really see that coming necessarily, that defense would be as strong as it is this year. And as we said, especially this week with their run defense so solid going against Derrick Henry and that Titans running offense. So it's going to be, I think, a really interesting playoff run for the Ravens. There's a lot of pressure there. And ultimately, Lamar Jackson is going to have to come through, and the defense has to come through and support him. And obviously, it'll help if they have Ingram back and all the different pieces to the puzzle that they need to put together. But I like this Ravens team a lot, and we'll see how it shakes out.
Well, you had a beautiful Super Bowl up there 2 years ago, despite the fact that Philadelphia people showed up. But the weather's going to be a little better in Miami 2 weeks from now. So we're going to settle on this Miami Super Bowl and try to get this thing done. Jeff, it's great to hear from you and have you on the program. Certainly it was a great week to have you on with the Vikings and the Titans, both a part of this thing and your tradition. I hope you're at least rooting for somebody purple this week, Jeff.
Oh, I am definitely. I am definitely. I have my purple Viking blood, and as I said, like the Ravens too. But the Vikings are still my hometown team, and they're the ones I'm pulling hardest for.
I will leave you with Skull. That's all I'll say, all right?
Exactly. Thanks, Nestor.
Take care. You got it. Jeff Diamond joining us here. Longtime GM, first with the Minnesota Vikings, and, of course, became the president of the Tennessee Titans at the turn of the century. Living up in the Twin Cities, a good friend of Brian Billick and many of my friends as well. And I'm a Zimmer guy. So if the Minnesota Vikings are whom we are to see in Miami, good luck to the Minnesota Vikings. Good luck to anybody trying to beat us right now. We got a lot of purple mojo and momentum. Down to Miami this week. If you're interested in joining us on our sojourn for Super Bowl 54, throw me an email, nasty@WNST.net. I'm out on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram, and everywhere you are, we are. WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. Get ready for Saturday night downtown. Be a good night for a fight. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.